Hello and welcome to the Punchpod. My name is Panchsheel and this is a podcast where I talk about creativity, art, and everything in between. Joining me today are Rahul and Anshul, who are two of the three co-founders of the tech startup Munch, where they try to make capitalism easier for creatives. Munch aims to help creators and freelancers make their administrative, business, and legal tasks easier by simplifying things like making invoices, contracts, and taxes. Today, we discuss the creator economy, the story behind Munch, and how to not be exploited as a creator. Rahul and Anshul, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having us, man. Super excited about this. I'm Rahul. I'm one of the co-founders here at Munch. I'm here with Anshul, who is the other co-founder, and then we also have Hamir, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but he's also part of us, and he leads the tech side of things here at Munch. Anshul leads product, and I do everything else, which is basically marketing, sales, talking to people, getting coffee, what have you.
Amazing. Right, so I just want to begin at the very beginning before you guys started Munch. What were the both of you doing this and what made you switch to creating something that helps creators?
Sure. So actually, like before Munch, I was in a completely different space, completely different phase of life. I used to work at an American boutique private equity firm, which used to invest in mature businesses in the US. By background, I come from like finance and economics, did economics in undergrad. And after that, finished the CFA program in 2018, post which I was at my previous job. And to be honest, a startup was never on the horizon for me. For me personally, I was always one of those, typical corporate, will go into consulting or banking or something like that. But I think as I got closer to this life, I understood that, okay, like I started to learn more about it and just began to develop a point of view on, things I like, things I don't like. And by this time, this was like 2020, early 2020, when it'd been a few years that I was in the space and had learned about all of these things. And the pandemic hit. I was actually planning for an MBA initially before Munch and before the pandemic hit. And it was around that time that, Anshul came up to me, and she's always been like this super entrepreneurial, typical, Marwadi, coming from Marwadi business family. So she has this like knack for like businesses and what could work, what wouldn't, like what's the market like. So she came up to me at that point and she was like, I have this idea of fintech in India because the space is evolving. There's been lots of regulatory change, which will make it easier, and like it's the time is right for building a product which helps people like you and me with our money. And at that time, this strongly resonated with me because despite coming from finance and understanding money a little better than the average person, I was still horrible at like making the right decisions with money. I mean, irresponsible, of course, but also was not willing to put in the time or the effort, even though it probably wouldn't take me that much time to figure those things out. So that like her like initial sort of idea really resonated with me, and we started jamming. I'm talking like March 2020, when the pandemic had just hit, lockdowns were underway. And so obviously I had like a lot of free time outside of work, and that's what I would spend most of my time on with Anshul.
What about you, Anshul? Where were you before Munch?
Yeah, I was actually working with Rahul at the same firm, different teams, but kind of doing the same work. And I've been thinking about what can we build in India. And I come from a finance and a quant background, so it just made a lot of sense for me since I've been keeping tabs on this space as well to kind of explore opportunities and like problem set within that space. So kind of like walked up to him and was like, "Hey, do you want to like start something?" And we kind of like chatted through it for a few months, spoke with a bunch of people, both on the regulatory side and also like customers, to kind of figure out what would end up becoming.
Long story short, about a year in, after talking to hundreds of people from different sort of backgrounds, occupations, like interests, we realized that a lot of people are kind of sick of their corporate jobs. They want to do their own thing, whatever that is, and usually it's something creative, whether it's design or podcasting or making art or making funny videos on the internet. And more people were doing it abroad, like in the US, but also in India. And the other sort of like learning that we had is that life can be very difficult for people who want to pursue a path that is not traditional, especially in India, on a very tactical level of like, how do I earn money from what I want to do? How do I make sure that my clients sort of don't screw me over and not pay me. And taxes, taxes was the other thing which I think even a lot of people in finance, myself included to an extent, wouldn't really understand how they work and like what are you really supposed to do, because they're just like such a black box. And this problem is magnified like 10x for people who are like self-employed or freelancers or business owners, right? Of course, when you're a business owner, if you have some money, you have a team working for you, so they kind of take care of it for you. But when you're a freelancer or like an independent like creator or independent business, then that gets really, really hard, because not only do you have to do your own thing, but you also have to figure out accounting, taxes, bookkeeping, contracts. That's really overwhelming, especially for someone if someone's involved in a creative task, chances are that they're not really aware of those things. So all of these things like really resonated with us, and we kind of decided, earlier in 2021 to exclusively focus on these sets of people who want to do something creative, want to earn a living through this, want to do this for the rest of their lives, or at least the next phase of their lives, and decided to really drill down and make things easier for them.
That's interesting. Before we get into the more nitty-gritty stuff about money and life and finances, where is Munch now?
We launched a product at the beginning of February, at the beginning of this month, which is like the 1st of Feb, after about, I would say, like 5 to 6 months of like hardcore like development and iteration and testing. So that's where we're at. We have a few customers, but now we're just looking to get as many people as possible to use our product and give us feedback and just grow from here and build something that's useful for creative folks.
Amazing. So now let's jump into a little philosophical debate. Why do we as a society, as an Indian society, as an Indian culture, why do you guys think, why do we not talk about money enough? Because I know for a fact that most of my creator friends or creative folks, just yesterday I was having a very interesting conversation with this comic friend of mine. She does comedy. And I asked her, do you share pay scales? She said, yeah, sure, but we don't necessarily share pay scales. If someone comes to us asking how much should I charge for this, we will give them a range, but we will never tell them how much we're making. Why do you think that is? Why do we as a culture just not talk about money?
Well, that's a very interesting question, kind of like going back into just like how we perceive money, how we grew up with it as well kind of impacts it. So we think of money as an outcome of whatever you do in life. It's something that kind of tells you that, hey, are you successful or not? That's essentially how we view it. So if you make lesser money than a person X, you're probably not as successful, or that's what's been ingrained in our brains since the childhood. So it's also us trying to be very protective of like, okay, I'm making this much, but is this the right amount to tell them? Or we think that, okay, that person is junior. If I tell them this amount, would they go to a client with that amount and then get rejected by it? So like, how does that kind of work in that situation? Because like when you think about a pay scale, it ranges significantly. It's dependent on multiple variables. It's dependent on not just you as a creator and your skills. It's dependent on what are you working on, with whom you're working on. Like if I'm working with an Amazon, sure, I can charge them because they have the budget for it. But if you're working with Munch, I have nothing to pay you. I'd be like, hey, some goodwill here, please. But like I said, like it depends on multiple factors, and it's very difficult to give an exact number of what it is. So one of the good guidelines that we've seen a few of the creators follow is that have a limit beyond which you will not go below. So if I know that my hourly rate is 10,000 INR, I'm going to stick with that. And I'm not going to take projects below that. Unless, of course, like you like something that they're offering and you're like, okay, you know what, I don't mind. Let me just work. I'll learn a lot more. But I think that kind of becomes like a primary way of thinking of it. Like, what are the variables that come into the picture? How should I be thinking about it? And realizing that you should not associate your pay as an equivalent to success, because it's varied. Like, if I am in finance, it doesn't mean I'm doing something crazy just because I'm getting paid more. I'm literally not. I come from there. I know that. I think it's also like a mental block that we need to like clear through and kind of understand what goes into associating that payment and being comfortable with charging the number that you think is right for it and then like standing for it. And in some cases, obviously negotiating. But I think it's also like a learning journey that comes through like a lot of mentorship and a lot of rejections and acceptances over time.
So as creator, I know I'm very bad at negotiating, right? As someone who's starting out, they don't know what to charge. Where are the resources for that? Who do they ask if they're just entering and someone comes, okay, hey, this is my product. You have a substantial following on Instagram. Here, do like an exposure type thing,
Yeah.
you will get enough money, you will get enough exposure, and you get our product for free. You get to keep our product. Where is the education that comes that lets you know that you should take this deal or not?
Yeah. It's quite unfortunate that that doesn't exist right now. And we've obviously, as a part of building Munch, we've had so many people quote that as one of the largest problems that they face on a day-to-day basis, as to like, hey, I just like started doing this, but I don't know how to charge. People come to me saying that, hey, why don't you post this on your Instagram? But they just are not willing to pay me. One of the things that we realized works really well is that if you know someone who does the exact same thing or has been doing that for a while, kind of going and approaching them from a mentorship perspective, having that conversation, just like connecting with other creators and kind of sharing that makes it very helpful. I think US has this concept of like creator houses. You have like a Netflix show also, like Hype House. So I think the reason that works really well is because you're able to share those experiences and ensure that you don't have to make the same mistakes to learn. You're also learning from others' mistakes. And obviously, you don't have to be a part of a creator house necessarily to be able to do that, but just being a little more open about reaching out to people. Because you'd be surprised how many people are open to helping each other. And everyone that we've spoken with definitely reiterates on this fact that freelancers, creators, these are a very tight knit community, and everyone has gone through the struggle to understand what it takes to make it. And they're like usually very open to like helping people out. So I'd say like seek for that help because no one is otherwise going to like come and provide it. Seek for it. Look at people who have done it better than you are doing currently. Understand the entire process of it, because it could be possible that your first paycheck is not going to be very high, but that's okay. But that doesn't mean you stick with that. You kind of try and improve your skills. You get to the next path. You kind of collaborate with other people and try to see how you can improve so you can charge higher. Because obviously it's also like a fairly long journey. But obviously I would say that never work for exposure. Like,
So you're
don't do
saying
that.
one of the main things that we should do as creators, as individual creators, is reach out to people who are doing a little better and kind of have an honest conversation about money.
Absolutely. Always.
That is exactly what I'm trying to do with this podcast.
I'm glad.
Because one of my main goals with this podcast is talk about money and be a little more shameless about talking about money. This actually reminds me of a story. When I was in college, when I was in my final year of college, I went to a media school, by the way. A client had come up to me for a photography gig, and I didn't know how much to charge. So I went to the mentorship that I should be having in an educational institute, and I told them this is the amount that I told them I would charge. The professor just looked at me and laughed. Judgment came from a place where there should have been no judgment. They should have been telling me, okay, this is the wrong amount. You should charge, 10 times more than this or 50 times more than this. I'd actually charge them 6,000 for a photo shoot when, with my education, with my background, with my training, I should have been charging 15,000 for a day.
Or at least like given you like guidelines as to like how you could even talk to them about it or negotiate.
Right, exactly. And what I got was being laughed in the face. I had to tell the professor, listen, you are professor, I am student. Don't laugh at me. But that way literacy aspect comes in here. Even when in a media school where people are not willing to talk about money, how do things get better? So here's my question to you. Do you think there is enough financial literacy among creators or like freelancers in general?
Well, I think like the question could just be, is there enough financial literacy and the answer still kind of stays the same. I do think that there is increased awareness about the issue because there's lots of content out there. There's lots of some big creators, famous creators who are creating content around these topics, and of course like NFTs and cryptocurrency. So there's lots of stuff that's happening out there which is forcing people to sort of think about these issues. Does that count as financial literacy? I'm not sure of that because in my definition, like when someone's financially literate, they have the ability to make the financial decisions that are right for them. And that may or may not be happening right now. I don't know. But there is increased awareness, which is obviously a positive sign. I think the increasing amount of like content is a little bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that, of course, it helps, pushes this stuff into people's faces and they're forced to think about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there, which in the case of like finance can be quite disastrous, right? Because you don't want someone who is not earning a lot of money and like has dependents to invest, say like half of their paycheck into like cryptocurrency, right? That is not an advisable like investment. Not that I'm saying that don't invest into crypto, but like just be conscious of what your situation is, what are your goals, what is it that you can really afford, how much can you afford, like what is your definition of risk, right? Which is very, very subjective,
Right.
and different for different people.
So, what you're saying is financial literacy, according to you, is a little vague, and the right way to put it is like awareness. People are asking the right questions, at least now.
Yes.
Why do you think content is a double-edged sword? That is something I want you to...
Because especially with finance, right? Like maybe this doesn't happen. Or rather, this only happens in certain like circles of society where you have like these WhatsApp groups of traders or people who claim to be traders and will say, I've actually received certain like text messages saying, XYZ stock target price 500, current price 200. Buy and hold, great 10x returns, whatever. This is literally like this was the contents of that message. And like the same, like maybe not the same message, but if you take into account like just the nature of that message, and that can obviously be you can fine tune it, you can like make it prettier to like consume, but you can still go with the same intent of misguiding someone to like sort of mess around with stock prices, because that does happen. That is a sort of thing in like the industry, right? So which is why I think like content around finance specifically is a little bit of a double-edged sword. Content in general, of course, is great, but I think when you're consuming content around finance, you have to be a little more nuanced and a little more mindful of like what is it, who is it written by, do they have an intention of getting you to behave in a certain way with your money?
So verify your sources.
Yeah, really verify your sources, and think that like even if someone's doling out advice, like make sure that it is right for you, right? It may or may not be. It may be right for someone else. It may not be right for you.
Right. So let's switch gears a little and move away from finance, because मुझे finance का ज़्यादा कुछ आता नहीं है. Let's talk about the problems that creators are facing. From all of the research that you guys have done for creating Munch, what has come up as one of the major problems that creators are facing, especially related to money?
Like when you talk about creators as well, there's like different, like there's creators at multiple, like who are at different points in their journey, right? And the challenges like change from each point. And then just like in any entrepreneurial sort of setting, right? When you're a fledgling startup to like when you're a well-funded startup to when you're like, like pre-IPO company, right? The challenges are different. It's the same in a creator's journey, right? From the moment you start off, from day one, at that point you're thinking, holy crap, I have to like create content every day. How will I do it, right? What is like coming up with ideas, executing on those ideas. Specific to money, how will I make money? Like who will pay me?
Right.
Right. That is, I think that's a challenge that like most creators face, like for a long part of their initial journeys. And it's only later, once they've matured a little bit, they've understood the kinds of skills that they've built, and who is willing to like pay for those skills, that they get a little more comfortable around that. But I think initially, of course, monetization is such a massive problem for everyone. You have platforms like Gumroad and Patreon, which I think are like great. They're like steps in the right direction, and I mean they've been around for a while now. They started like in the early like 2010s, but I mean, I think we're yet to see their success in developing economies like India, which are more price-sensitive markets where, sure, I think like people have paid for like television, like cable, but if you ask someone, will you pay for a certain video? I think like a 10-minute video, I think people would, I don't know how people would react to that.
Yeah, especially with people who are not coming from the space, who are just
Exactly.
outsiders looking
Yeah.
in, and they're like, I want you to make a video.
Yeah.
I will give you exposure, or like
Yeah.
$10.
Exactly, right. And I mean, it's so hard for businesses to pay it, like fathom the idea of paying a creator. What happens with consumers, when you're like taking the Patreon approach and you're saying like, hey, you guys are my fans, please pay for my stuff and I'll make more of it. I think theoretically it should work. I think all of us in theory will admit that, yes, we will pay for our favorite music, like artist, or favorite like, guy who makes funny videos, or girl who makes funny videos. But would we actually do it? I don't know. I think like as a society, we are like so ingrained to be price sensitive, even if you're like slightly well off. I mean, unless like you're Ambani, in which case it probably doesn't matter. But even people like I mean, I come from like upper middle class, I would say, but I'm still like very picky about like what to pay for, what not to pay for, especially when it comes to content. I mean, never mind the fact that I'm broke, but like even if I had money, like I would still be like picky about it. I think like monetization is obviously a major challenge for creators. I think like the way creators, I think there's a little bit of a mindset shift that has to happen with creators, as with entrepreneurs. I mean, I'm more of an entrepreneur, less of a creator, I would say. So I can like talk from that angle. Where I think that you kind of have to think that, okay, it's going to take some time for this stuff to pay off, if it pays off, financially in a very direct way, because if it does, then obviously like it'll be worth it. But even if it doesn't, like it will it will lead you to something which will pay off, one day or the other. You will get there, right? It's just, of course, the journey is hard, as is any entrepreneurial journey. But I think like creators, they may or may not realize it, but they're building really valuable skills if they're taking their craft seriously. If they're, just the idea of going in every day and creating that video or writing that blog or, making that song, that is really, really hard. And it is like building you up to something.
Yeah, that is really, I mean, it is very difficult. As someone who does this weekly now,
Yeah,
it is very difficult.
Yeah.
But honestly, when creators start something, we don't go with it with monetization in mind at all.
Yeah.
It's a very pure, very close to our heart. We don't want to share it with anyone. There are people who are reluctant creators.
Absolutely.
Who create great content, but they don't share it with the world.
I think a part of being a successful creator and entrepreneur is also to be able to take a step back from what you've created or entrepreneured, and be able to like slightly like rationally or critically think about, okay, like what can I do with this? Like, is there someone out there who will pay me for this kind of content, or can I create something like this which will be like useful to someone else, and maybe I can see if they value it. So, and which is very hard if you're a creative person and you're a sort of put your heart on your sleeve and like make music or like write stuff. It's a very hard thing to do, right? Which is why like the whole like Anshul point around like collaboration of not just reaching out to people who are like a few steps ahead of you, but even if it's your friends who are like in a slightly different space but are interested and want like what's best for you. I think it's worth just talking to them and figuring out, okay, like what do you guys think of this? What can we do here? So I mean, I think like it's a difficult journey, but and monetization will always be like a key problem, and I don't know if there's a systemic way to like tackle that.
But how do creators do this, right? What is the mindset shift that happens where they decide, okay, this I need to monetize? And are there any products or services that help creators understand that you are not your work? Your work is separate. and you have to learn how to figure it out, and you have to actually critically think about all of this and then figure out how to monetize it, because a lot of creators I know are very personal. They're like, my work is my baby. If anyone says anything, I will rip them through shreds. That is the kind of mindset that they have. And they're like, I will continue keeping doing this, even though they are great at it, and that could become a full-time thing. But I will also have a job as a backup, because even though there may be a lot of potential in this, I don't want to do it because I don't want to make that change. Are there any products or services or people, agencies that are helping creators realize that potential and figure it out?
That's a very interesting question, right? Primarily because it's, again, one type of a mental block that, hey, what if someone criticizes me? Am I really not good at it? But if you think of it in a different way, that if you don't publish or if you don't put your work out there, how do you even get better? It's like Jack Conte keeps saying, unless you put like 1,000 videos out there, like everything is a funnel, right? Unless you put 1,000 things out there, how would you get that one successful thing? Look at Taylor Swift publishing like so many freaking songs during the pandemic.
Right.
One has to take off and you get better in that entire process of it. In terms of platforms, there are few in India that are doing a great job of helping creators monetize. I think one you guys might have heard of is like Tag Mango.
Yeah.
Then you have like, again, they're not like India based, but then you have Gumroad. You have like a bunch of other places like Instamojo where you could put your products out, see if it's selling or not. In terms of music, it gets even more difficult because like how do you even like find good music? I think SoundCloud used to be the OG platform where everyone would go to find like new music. I don't think that really exists now. And it's more like get your friends to share your own work, right? Like encourage them. You need to also do, the business term for it is like the sales and the business development of it. It's not just like creating and sitting down. It's kind of an economy where we live that, you gotta own up to it, that even if it's bad, at least you've given it a shot. You're getting better at it the more and more you do it. I don't think I've come across any like particular agencies that sort of help you get better at it or kind of help you with it. There are definitely agencies that kind of promote you once you've garnered a few followers or subscribers, but in the initial days, not really. It's like you have to go through the grunt work, kind of get to a specific position, realize that this is what you want to do. Like, because after a point, there's a very high likelihood that you burn out and then realize that this is definitely not for me. I might as well just stick to my job and pursue this as a hobby. But if you actually really end up loving it, you'll have to put in that grunt work for a few months and write it out. And obviously, like we spoke about, collaborating with people, reaching out to people, kind of talking to them, because I'm sure everyone has gone through this journey. And there are a lot of new platforms and technologies that are coming up. So just like leveraging them, keeping an eye out of it. I think those are like a few things that you could definitely do to just ensure that you're putting out more work and not criticizing yourself before sharing it. I know how difficult that could be. Like even doing this like video setup is like so difficult for me, so I get that. But yeah, you just have to like write it out.
Just do it. Just work to publish.
Yeah.
Just like the Nike slogan.
No, and this is something that even I have noticed with everything that I create. One of the main things that I wanted to do with everything that I do, be it YouTube or this podcast, is that I'm building in public. I want anyone who wants to figure out what I think about or how I got my styles or my ideas, they can just go to my podcast, go to my YouTube channel and see. They can see the progression. They can see how I got better at video editing. They can see how better I got at enunciating my words. So there's a lot of that happens, So the more you publish, the more you work, the more you put things out there. And in a way, it's also sort of like once you press publish,
Yeah.
you detach yourself from that piece of work. You move on to the next.
Correct.
So that is something that I really like.
Like we've seen so many musicians as well, right, who've released their music, say like 2015, but then all of a sudden TikTok made them popular in like 2020. And they're like, shit, this is such a old song. Where was this all my life? So you never know.
You just have to repurpose it and make things worthwhile. You said something very interesting about keeping an eye out on new technologies. So here's something I want to ask you guys. What are your thoughts on crypto and the whole NFT space that's coming up in the creator economy? Because I am very iffy about that. I'm not very sure where I stand on it because, on one hand, you have the environmental damage that's happening. On the other hand, you have people who are earning lakhs in days. So it's such a weird, unregulated space, and the Indian government, although it's not regulated, is taxing it. That's weird. What's up with that? Thoughts, please.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, and like I tend to be like a little more curious about these things. So I've dug deep into it and obviously gone down that rabbit hole many times. Obviously, there are challenges with the energy emissions that are happening. And obviously, when you kind of like look that up, there are also people saying that, hey, we're making it better. We're kind of ensuring that this kind of comes down over a period of time. But when we look at the other side of it, where people are putting up NFTs and actually making a buck out of it, um, I have a very different opinion from other people where I'm just like, if there's nothing wrong in trying, if you just put it out there and see if it's working for you, why not? Because if there's an opportunity, there's no reason to let it go if you're curious and know how to leverage it. There's obviously a lot of marketing that is required here because that's how the space is. That's how it's built, which is completely around community. The way you look at these NFT drops as well, they don't just happen like, hey, I'm just going to release like this one art piece. Even if you look at like behind the NFT drops that happen, they're like a team of people working on it. You have a person who's actually writing the code to replicate the art across like different phases. Like if I'm just talking about like a particular CryptoPunks, for example, or something else. So if you realize that that is something that you can make, why not? And I could be completely wrong, and this could all go down tomorrow. But I feel like if there is something interesting, might as well just take the risk if you think you have the time and the energy to be able to go through that.
No, I completely agree with you. And while you were talking, I was also talking to myself in my head. And I was like, this is interesting. You said something, if you have the chance, why not go for it? And the environmental thing is also understandable because, you know, corporates and big companies they pay a lot of money to have this narrative set that you are the problem, you the
Correct.
individual is the problem, while we are doing 90% of the damage. So hey, if you can mint an NFT and get a few $1,000s out of it, do it. Get the money. Fuck capitalism.
And also to like talk about your point on the taxation piece of it. Obviously, that doesn't make anyone happy. Like taxing for it. Um, I think only time will say like how it happens because RBI has made a statement that it's obviously not legal or illegal yet. It's like they're still evaluating it, but why not just make the buck out of it?
Yeah, they're in it. They're in it for the money as well.
Exactly, taxes, right?
Yeah. Okay, cool. A question for Rahul next. Earlier, you said you are more entrepreneur and a little less creator, but you are a little bit creator from what I can understand. You've been writing blogs. What's it like being on the other side? What's it like sitting down and putting ideas to, to the computer and trying to market it? What's it like?
Okay, let's see. As a child, the only creative activity I did was draw sketches of cartoons. So I actually had this. It's slightly different from what you asked, but I'm going to get there in a second.
Yeah, sure.
I used to buy a bunch of like pencil boxes which had like Dragon Ball Z like characters and like just sketch them. So by the time I was in like sixth grade, I had like almost a room full of pencil boxes because I would just draw them. And I also really love Dragon Ball Z, so I used to like go crazy after the merch. But that was like the only like creative thing I ever did. So I never thought of myself as like a creative kind of guy. And there were a lot of my friends were into like playing the guitar and like making music and stuff. But I think like around 2015-ish or 2016, by the time I graduated from college, that's when I kind of like had this bug of like trying to write something. So again, it's not. I think that was the first time I actually discovered, holy crap, this is so hard. Like, why is it so hard to write? Even though I've written like a bunch of papers for like school and stuff, or like in college, but why is this so hard? And like it was around the time that Medium had just started. It started getting traction at least. So I created an account on Medium and like I wrote this blog on why banks are a little fucked up. Sorry, I'm not supposed to cuss. Yeah, I think that was the first time I remember like it being so hard that I have these thoughts in my head and I'm just not able to write it. Or if I'm able to write it, I have this like thing of who is going to read this? This is shit. Like it's so bad. I sent it to a few people. They were like, yeah, this is not good. So it was like
The classic
okay.
creator dilemma. Who's going to read this? This is shit.
Yeah. And there was this one night where I just got up at like 2 a.m. and it was like I couldn't sleep that night because this was playing in my head. And at 2 a.m. I just got up and I'm like, screw it, I'm just going to do it. And I just like hit publish and I just sent it to a bunch of people. I think everyone said that, okay, this is better than my previous pieces that I had done. But I think that was the first time I truly like internalized how hard it was. And then back in 2020 when we actually started like jamming on Munch and like trying to make, like there was a phase, like if you go back to our Instagram page, we used to make like these posts around like making, like explaining financial concepts through like pop culture and like TV shows and movies. That was when the next wave of like it's so hard to be a creator hit. Because we would try and like push out one post a week, which is honestly not that much if you're a professional like creator, but I like we were also like trying to combine like financial concepts with like TV, so like a lot of research had to go in. So I think that was like the really hard part about that kind of content. But it was just so hard, man. Like it's just so hard. like looking back at and that was like the first phase of our startup in a way, and it was just incredibly hard. But at the same time, there were some things that really worked, and to see like people come back and say, hey, I learned something new from the stuff that you put out, I think that was like really fulfilling. And I think since then, like the bug to like a right kind of like stuck onto me, and I've been trying to push myself to do this more and more. Which is why like now that I've gotten back to like blogging for Munch, like we figured out, content marketing is something that we want to do. So in a way it's like really good for me because now I get to like sort of like stretch my very small writing muscles. It teaches you a lot about yourself. And at least writing in particular, it teaches you how to sort of like think a little more critically, because when you're thinking, it's all in your head. And then when you're like forced to write it out, you kind of like, you're putting it out there, even if it's, whether it's on your screen or whether it's on a piece of paper. But in a way, there is one layer of like abstraction that's introduced, right? So now you can actually think from not completely a third person's perspective, but you can think a little more clearly about, okay, what am I trying to say here, right? So for me, at least personally, I found that whenever I'm, like kind of messed up in my head and I'm thinking of a lot of things and I'm kind of stressed, I'll just like write things like as they are in my head. And I found that to like at least improve my mental health in that moment in time, if not my decision making. So
No, that's true.
Yeah, like that for me, like I think that has been my biggest takeaway of like being a creator, quote unquote.
Quote unquote mat bol do, ho aap creator.
Yeah, I mean, I also see like, you, for example, you put in so much effort into this, like just this whole setup and like, like trying to get people to talk about like these like different like interesting topics, or people who are trying to make like videos around different things. I mean, I see the effort, right? Which is why sometimes I feel like I shouldn't maybe say like I'm a creator, because I'm not putting in the same kind of effort that these people are,
No,
like,
effort is, it's not directly proportional, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like people are making millions out of 10-second reels.
Sure, yeah.
But if you're taking 2 hours to make a great piece of like a blog,
yeah,
you're a creator.
Yeah. But even those 10-second reels, I mean, I imagine, at least from what I know, some of the people who actually make those reels, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of like work that goes into making them.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So there's definitely, I mean, all in all, I'm saying is that it is one of the hardest, but one of the most rewarding things that anyone can do. Maybe not financially immediately, but at least from a life character development like perspective.
Okay, let's move on to a little more capitalistic side of things. Let's talk about platforms and power. So most of these creator companies, I say creator companies in quote, in the end they're all money-making capitalistic machines. Let's talk about Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. At the end of the day, although there are a lot of creators on these companies who use these companies, at the end of the day, these companies are for profit. They don't really care that much about the creators, because at the end of the day, they just want to make more money. YouTube, for example, has a very good revenue model out of all of these, whereas TikTok doesn't. TikTok, maybe they'll give a fraction of the amount that you have gotten. But then again, TikTok is not in India. Why are we talking about TikTok? Let's talk about something else. Instagram, Instagram की भी बात कर लो तो Instagram is very, Instagram itself doesn't pay, sponsors pay. My question is this, very long-winded way. I didn't frame this quite properly, but how can platforms like these be more mindful of how they pay their creators, and what can they do better so that creators actually stay and are incentivized to create?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered it within your own question of like how YouTube does it, which is essentially like a revenue share basis. But if you look at Instagram, they don't share their ad revenue. TikTok, on the other hand, at least has like a creator fund. We all understand why the economics of it doesn't work right now, but when it started, it was brilliant. Everyone was getting paid. If you went viral, if you had X number of views, you'd get paid for it.
Can you explain what the TikTok Creative Fund was, just in a tiny bit?
Yeah. So the TikTok Creator Fund was essentially the company pooling in an X amount of money. I think it was like 100 million at the time. And then saying that I'm going to distribute this in a way that is not relevant to the history of what your account is, but more on a reel basis. So if one particular reel did well, you'd get paid for that. It doesn't matter how many subscribers, how many following people you have. You could be anyone. You could have 0 followers, but if your particular, like, I don't know, it's called reel, but it's called like the TikTok itself
Right.
did well,
Yeah.
you'd get paid for it, which is not the case on YouTube. On YouTube, for you to be able to monetize, you gotta have that 1,000 mark that you need to cross, plus some 5,000 hour view rate. Which is why if you look at like the US right now, the Canada as countries, I don't think it's in Canada either, but if you look at the US and the creators there, they start off on TikTok. So now if they actually make good work, they could start earning from day one, because again, TikTok has no such requirement of minimum subscribership, and then eventually move on to YouTube. And this is like a pretty common trend that people have been observing over the past like couple of years. Which is why you have like YouTube Shorts now, which also has a Shorts fund.
Right.
They also started off at like 100 mil, I think. Could be wrong, but now they're like increasing it. I think this was after Hank and John Green kind of pointed it out that, hey guys, the more people making money, we end up making lesser. So obviously the platforms itself have a lot to figure out in terms of what they're doing. One of the interesting things that Instagram did was having like what Twitter has in terms of super follow, having something of that sort to be introduced in the future for profiles, but still not go down the route and saying that, hey, we're still going to share our ad revenue with you, which I think should have been the case, because at the end of the day, people come on Instagram not because of Instagram itself. They come on the platform because of the creator. They want to follow someone. Like if I'm there, I'm following someone and I want to see their content. If a platform views a creator as such an important part, an important stakeholder in their own revenue and in their own growth, I think they should be monetized like in the right format. And I think YouTube does it well and have been able to kind of improve on it over time by looking at like different models. And I think other platforms would also eventually come to that stage. Probably it's just a matter of time, because you've also seen, then you also have platforms like Substack, where the platform itself doesn't take the load of kind of giving you the money. They don't run ads. They're just like, let's only be like subscriber only, which is also similar to like Patreon. You have Tag Mango in India. You have a bunch of other people doing it. They're also very platform centric at the end of the day. So I think these are still very early days in how the monetization has kind of happened. Like if you think about it, creators are just 15 years old. There was no such thing before in terms of like platform creation. So I think there's a lot more that could potentially come in, which could resonate a lot more like what YouTube did in terms of ad revenue share.
Something interesting you said. You said creator, the whole creator thing is only 15 years old. And now that you said it, I'm a little bit in an existential crisis, because it's only 15 years old and there is so much money in it. So now that there are more apps and more creator funds, more things like that happening, making money is going to get relatively a lot easier. So I want to ask you this. What are your predictions for the future of the creator economy?
Yeah.
Especially in India.
especially in India. Okay, that's a very tricky thing because in India we're still, like, I think we were just discussing it today, that in India we're still very, very early. We are not even 15 years in. We are barely 5 years in. So we have like a long way to go right now. Because if in the US you look at like one of the earlier creators, is actually Justin Bieber. He came
Right.
through YouTube. Look at him now. So when you look at what the creator economy or like what these things could evolve into in India, there's a lot to see. I think in India right now, we've only seen creators successfully become good at monetizing only in like the fintech space mostly, or like to a certain extent in lifestyle as well. But there's just so much white space. There's gaming left. There is just educational content which is kind of like coming up, but it's still not that much yet, unless you're running like your own courses or doing things there. There's like a lot of beauty that's happening, but again, very limited. And if you look at the creators in the US, they have their own brands that they're launching. They have their own games, their own apps. So I look at creators as like the first step to becoming an entrepreneur or like a multi conglomerate in some format. Because once you're a creator, you've essentially solved for the problem of distribution and trust. So once you solve for that, and if there are people who talk about like, hey, I'm your fan, I'm gonna buy anything that you sell me because I trust in you, I trust in whatever you're gonna give me, you've essentially built a business for you just by that. We see that primarily in like courses in India right now, but I think there's a lot more potential where a lot more D2C brands could come up. There's
So creator-led D2C brands.
creator-led D2C brands, yes. Could start off as like partnerships initially with like existing brands, but then could be like standalone eventually. But again, we're still very early in India. We're not even 5 years into it. And most of the creators that I think we have right now that are successful also came from the initial wine kind of a led movement. And now we see a lot of like YouTubers becoming like greater than 1 million that are individuals. Like if you look at the largest YouTube channels in the world, a bunch of them are Indians, but they're not individual creators. They're like Sony and a bunch of like
big
T-series.
conglomerates. Yeah.
Yeah. So we yet to see like the individual creators become big. We still are in that middle class of creators that we talk about, where majority of the revenue doesn't come from the act of creation itself, but it comes from like more like freelancing or just from their side gig or income or the things that they're doing. They're very like slight sliver of that niche that is able to make a good enough income to just sustain and be like, hey, like I can do this for the rest of my life.
No, but I think creators in India also belong to a certain type of group. Like English speaking, affluent people are usually the early adopters.
Yeah.
Whereas in a lot of places, it's just not reached. Or even if it has reached, brands won't pay them because they don't seem like the people who will,
Correct.
who can sell.
Yeah, that's the other point that I was gonna like get at is that I mean there's a couple of things actually, but if you think about why do creators exist like in the current form, is that brands pay them so that they can like drive their sales by selling to like the fans of the creators, right? But if you look at like India, where I don't remember what the data like looked like, but I think it was about maybe 1 or like maybe 5% of the entire country is like in that upper, affluent upper middle class bracket, right? Which is technically like you can only monetize that group,
Yeah.
right? Now there's a large chunk of like creators in India who are going to come from outside that group, who are going to have massive followings. What happens with them, right? Like, are they like, do they not earn a living? And they are a lot like today they are being fed the dream that, hey, like if you can like make videos on this app, but and earn money through it, but like from a long-term sustainability standpoint, where do you go if like they can't really buy a lot of stuff, right? So there are like challenges with like developing countries creator economies which are going to come up, which like how they'll play out we don't know, it's indeterminate. And then the other thing that I was going to say is that if you look at like the OG creators, like at least in the last 40 years, they're actually movie stars, right? Like they're the ones who, like, of course the way they start off is like is very different. At least the way they did start off was very different. I mean, I just think of like in the context of Bollywood, right? Who's like one very, very big creator? Salman Khan. He has like Being Human, and like all of these like brands and people go crazy after him and they watch his movies irrespective of how they do. Now that's like an interesting example of like creator economy in India, where it's like so concentrated in like the top sort of like echelons of Bollywood, right? And they like do all the movies, they have brands, they build businesses. Of course, that's changing now. You know, like you have people like Tanmay Bhatt who've come from nowhere, and like done what they've done, which is good. Which is like it's moving in the right direction. And even if you look at Tanmay Bhatt, right, it's not he's like a content genius. He knows what will work, but at the same time, he's also very entrepreneurial. As of now, I think he's working on like a crypto startup. I don't know what he's doing there, but I'm pretty sure he's heavily involved there. So like you have like the evolution of like the creator economy in India. Like I think the fact that we are like a developing country will like that will have some that will be a big challenge, but there will be like people who sort of like like wiggle their way out of it by and I mean that could also just be like being freelancers or working with like businesses to provide the services, because that's how they will like make money.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I kind of disagree with you in the way that you classified creators, because you said like Bollywood creators, like that kind of thing. You said you gave the example of Salman Khan, whereas I don't think Salman Khan necessarily classifies as a creator, because the creator in the modern sense of the word is an individual who creates things on their own. Salman has an entire team behind it. It's very capital intensive.
Sure.
Salman Khan's brand of creating.
Sure.
Right. So in that way, that is something that I'm very interested.
But I would say that like that's what creators at scale will look like. They will
Creators
have
at
teams.
scale.
Yes.
Creators
yes.
at scale.
Creators at
Yeah.
scale, of course.
Right. Before we end the episode, I want to ask you this. Last question of the day. What are some actionable tips for freelancers and creators to manage their money?
So creators and freelancers are very different from most people, because first of all, you don't have a salary income that comes in every month. So you kind of have to ensure that you're keeping an eye out on your finances and understanding how much money is coming in, how much is going out, how much is being saved and invested. Because at the end of the day, you have to think of like your goals, your long-term requirements as well. Now, most of the investment products in the market are obviously designed for salary, designed for a consistent income every month. SIPs is a great example for it. SIPs wouldn't really work for a creator, because how do you assign 10,000 every month when you don't know if you're even going to make that much? So you probably as a creator would have to take a very active role in managing your finances, ensuring that you have sort of a budget, not monthly, like sure, monthly for your expenses and income, but beyond that, reviewing it like what a business would. Having a quarterly goal, a half-yearly goal, a yearly goal to understand that, hey, did I actually achieve it? And then looking back and understanding, why did I not? Was it because I did not reach out to a lot of clients? Was it because I did not create enough? Am I doing something wrong in terms of my marketing? Could I do anything better? Because all of this is kind of interlinked, because it's just you're the one person business doing it. So I feel like having that active role is very important. But at the same time, I realize that creators do not necessarily have that knowledge or interest to be able to do that all the time. Really, it's also a lot about the time. So just approaching the right people in that aspect, and kind of having that understanding like, hey, what can I do here? It could be a CA itself, it could be an investment advisor. Now obviously that's kind of like expensive.
Yeah,
I
it
get
is expensive. So as a creator,
Yeah.
as an individual creator, what can one do without reaching out to these guys? Because learning about finances itself is a very big learning curve. I'm still learning and I don't
Yeah.
know enough. So what can one individual, single person do if they are to break up their finance education in a few parts?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is like, try to write to us. We try to help you as much as we can. But Obviously, I don't know if we could do that at scale right now, but I would recommend you to talk to your peers again, because you would really gain a lot of value from that. Because again, they've gone through that scale. They will tell you the mistakes that they've made, what can you do better. You could even just like call up your friend who does finance perhaps, and just in 1 hour conversation just get like some thoughts here or there. I'm not saying that you need to listen to them like 100%, but just getting like a head start on it, just starting somewhere which is not zero, could be a very helpful thing to do. But even if you don't have that, just write to us. We'd try to help you out in any possible way we can, or even like connect you to the right people. Yeah, and the email ID would be like anshul@munch.money. You can definitely write to us. And if we don't have the bandwidth, or if you're not able to like answer your question in the right possible way, we'll at least try to connect you to the right people who would be able to help you.
Perfect. One thing I want to get your insights on is how can a creator stop being exploited by big businesses or even businesses, anyone? Because as a creator, if someone comes to you with work,
Yeah.
you're like, oh my God, I'm getting paid for my work.
Correct.
But then in the end, the work will just end up becoming something so much more. You'll be asked to give 10,000 revisions, and when you ask for X amount of money, they'll say, no, we only have this much. But then you've already done the work.
Correct.
So contracts are important here. What are the basic things that one has to include in a contract, especially when working with someone, so that they are not taken advantage of?
There are actually a bunch of things that go into a contract, but I'm going to skip out on the legalese completely here and just focus on the work that you do and how you can include it. I think one of the most important things to do is like define your work. What is it that you're exactly working on? So you essentially call it like scoping it, just include it in the contract. And while you do that, it's also important to write down as like how many revisions you allow. That is just super important. I feel like when you ignore that, people can just take you for granted and keep coming back to you saying that, hey, one more minor change, could you just do it? But it takes up a lot of your time. So it's very important to have the number of revisions that you are able to make there. Then you have a cancellation policy. What happens if the project doesn't move forward? How do you get paid in that situation? Because it could be because of you as a creator where you're probably like sick and you're not able to like deliver on it. So how does that work? And in case of a brand, say for example, that they just had to let go of that budget from that project, what happens to the work that you've done so far? Do you get paid for it or not? So it's important for you to kind of define all of that in the contract itself. Other than that, like timelines, if you're able to define a timeline, do it. Otherwise, I've seen so many times where the creators do not add a timeline and the project just keeps stretching and the payment schedule doesn't come in. And always take advance and make sure you include it in the contract that you're taking X amount of advance there.
How much is recommended?
I have seen people take advance between 30% to 50%. If you've someone who you worked with a particular brand often, 50% is like the get-go there. The brand knows that you worked with them, the company knows that you worked with them, and the history exists there, so they're open to doing it. If you're working with someone new and you've realized that, okay, they're kind of unsure of it and you do want to work on that project, you can go slightly lower, but then you can break it into like multiple payments and not just have like one advance. You can have like, hey, I have this one advance, but then I'm also going to collect like one more additional advance in between. So you could like slice it into 3 or 2 depending on how comfortable you feel, but it's always important to take an advance there. Kind of despite the monetary benefit, you also get the benefit that they are kind of vested in the project as well and are just not going to ghost you. So that also becomes like a very important thing. And then because you end up doing a lot of creative work, the most important, in my opinion, is the grant of rights, where you're kind of giving the brand or the company that you worked with the right to use your artwork. So it's important for you to kind of lay out how they can use it. Is it just commercial? Is it also non-commercial purposes, or is it the other way around? And do you get recognition for that artwork? Can they edit that artwork but still kind of put it under your name? What is the moral obligation there? So all of this becomes very important. So these are like a few things that you have to include other than the legalese that can exist.
Very interesting. Well, that has been it from my side. Thank you guys so much for being on the Punchpot. This has, I'm sure, been a very interesting episode. And for everyone listening, if you guys need any sort of help with your creative businesses, or if you're an individual creator who wants money help, Anshul and Rahul are the guys to reach out. All of the links will be in the description. And please make sure you follow them on Instagram and subscribe to their newsletter, because there are some very interesting articles and insights on the creator economy. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.